So all I'm trying to do, Barry, is emulate the structure of many Formula One teams. Mercedes-Benz, which I touched on before, they have a Formula One team that develops and accelerates technology, and they have an R&D function, and they have a production function of selling cars. So I'm trying to sort of create a Formula One team, I suppose, but not go Formula One racing.
Yes.
But, to have that racing side, which is the university project that has the profile and brand awareness and the credibility to be able to showcase that technology. Sunswift Technology, which is the sort of R&D agency and design house. But we won't keep it to ourselves. It's great building cars and winning Bridgestone World Solar Challenges and creating Guinness World Records. But why stop there? If you've got something that's amazing that can have an effect on the future, why not let others have access to that? And I think that's that's the focus going forward.
Hello and welcome to the Big Problems Little Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Barry Scott, and I'm a copywriter, marketer and environmentalist. I love the outdoors, grew up watching David Attenborough and wanted to be like Jane Goodall when I was older. There's still time, but right now I'm fortunate enough to work with lots of very smart people who are trying to make the world a better place in lots of different ways. The goal of this podcast is to shine a light on all of the little solutions out there to a lot of the big problems we're facing. Today my guest is Richard Hopkins, who started working at Formula One at the age of 16 and climbed through the ranks at McLaren, then Red Bull, where he ended up as head of operations, leading the team to win an incredible 4 driver and constructor championships. Along the way he met Ayrton Senna, Bernie Ecclestone and all kinds of sporting legends before moving to Australia, where he started a new life as a professor at UNSW and an advisor to the Walkinshaw Andretti United supercar team. His main role now, however, is the principal of Sunswift Racing at UNSW, a group that's built a range of record-breaking solar vehicles and have now developed the world's first Tri-brid vehicle. He's a great proponent of having lots and lots of ideas and then just getting stuck into the best ones. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and follow in your favourite podcasting app or YouTube, and don't forget to share these little solutions far and wide so we can really make a dent in those big problems we're all facing. And now, I give you Richard Hopkins.
Yeah, and thanks, Barry. Brief introduction, which is good because it doesn't necessarily give the game away. Look, I'm 53 and I've probably got nearly 40 years to cover in a brief introduction, but yeah, you're right. Nearly 30 years in Formula One, 5 years at Brabham, 15 years at McLaren, which is great, travelling the world and working with drivers like Ayrton Senna and legends of that ilk. And then moving on to Red Bull Technology. This is obviously all back in the UK. I'm English. And I spent 9 years...
I could tell that. I could pick that up.
And
yes.
Yeah. An Englishman and a Scotsman on a call together.
There's a good bit of distance between us. That works.
And those 9 years at Red Bull, extraordinarily fruitful. A great moment for me, a great career moment. Fortunately, the business gave me a huge amount of autonomy to run the business operationally. And I brought in some great changes, things that I thought were going to create success, and fortunately, not just me alone, but an amazing team, amazing drivers, amazing set of engineers. That success came to fruition, and as you rightly said, 4 World Championships and 50 Grand Prix during my time. I left the UK back at the beginning of 2016. I say to people that I accidentally married an Australian, and they sort of raise their eyebrows and wonder what I mean by that. But it's just to get a bit of a laugh. Yeah. But I did marry an Australian 25 years ago, so it was only inevitable that at some point we were going to move over to Australia, and here I am. Arrived in 2016 and really didn't know what I was going to do next. Knew that I'd had an enjoyable career. And I wanted that enjoyment to continue. We can put sort of in brackets successful as well, but actually enjoyable was the more significant part of it. And I wanted to continue that on, but had no idea, not to sound too much like Bono and U2, but it's still finding what I'm looking for kind of thing. And maybe I still am today, ever adventurous and ever now probably in later years, probably calling myself more of an entrepreneur than anything else, and finding myself with a bit of a portfolio career. And one of those is the fact that I'm still working in motorsport. I work for a supercars team, Australian supercars team, which is probably on the opposite side of goodness than the other good side that I'm working at, which is the EV things that you mentioned. Yeah. I do quite a bit of keynote speaking, and that led me to having a conversation with the then Dean of Engineering at UNSW in Sydney, Mark Hoffman, and he invited me to join the university to work on some of the projects that were within engineering. For full disclosure, I said no, certainly more than once, maybe 2 or 3 times, because I was a little bit fearful of how a university operates as opposed to how a Formula One team operates, maybe being the polar end of the scales. But then he offered me the role of Professor of Practice. And for somebody who never actually went to university, having left school at 16 and starting in Formula One, I thought having the name Professor in front of my name and the business card would be a bit of a coup.
Yes.
And it still is. 6 years later on, it's still a bit of a coup. I get a kick out of booking flights online and ticking down the drop-down menu of Mr., Ms., Mrs. and getting to Professor, and actually being able to do it genuinely.
Yeah.
So I do that, and every time I do it, it puts a smile on my face.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess maybe we're here to talk about the work I'm doing at UNSW.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm involved quite a lot in sort of renewable energy, conservation and sustainability with what I do. And it just, the more and more organisations that I come across who just seem to be doing incredibly clever things to solve some of these big problems that we've got in the world. And it's actually lovely because it can be quite disheartening with the amount of issues that we all seem to have. When you find out that there's loads of really smart people working on all of these things, it really helps. So, when we were chatting before, and I just discovered and read a wee bit more about this car that you've developed, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the first Tri-brid car in the world. Is that correct?
Yep.
Do you want to explain to me exactly what that is and how that came about?
Yeah, look, I'll go back a little bit in as far as, I think engineers and scientists have a duty in the world to solve some of those big problems, and maybe it's going through the journey of ignorance with what's been happening to this planet that we live on. And it was naivety, more than ignorance, possibly, where we were pumping things into the air and we just didn't know what those effects were. So
I think that's been the case for a long time. We didn't really know.
Hundreds of years.
We didn't know. I don't think it's quite the case now, but it was for a long time.
No, it was, but we've gone through that journey, and we can hold those people accountable, but let's give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that they didn't understand what they were doing at that moment in time. And then I think we've gone through a period of almost denial of being aware of it, but not necessarily believing it, and at the same time not necessarily understanding what we needed to do to fix it. So we've been through that kind of period, and now we're entering the period where we know more about it. So all of a sudden those problems have come to light, and being engineers and scientists, we now want to fix those problems because we're aware of them, and all of a sudden we're able and capable, because of how we've evolved and how technology's evolved. We are finding solutions to those problems, and I think that creates a bit of a wave. Once we unlock a door of solution, we find more keys to unlock even more doors to solution, and that's where we're at now. So we're just seeing this massive intake of clever people, to your point, who are attacking these problems, which is fantastic. Maybe a little bit too late, but it's good that we're doing it.
I think it's unfortunately human nature, really, isn't it? To leave things to the last minute, and then anyway.
Yeah, you were right. It is doing this to the planet. It is 1.5 degrees and everything else. So that look, am I jumping on that bandwagon with what I'm doing at UNSW? Look, I'm a guy who loves problems, and I love solving problems, whether that was going to the Red Bull Formula One team who had never won a Grand Prix and making them into world champions, problem, solution, and result and success. And I love technology. I'm not an engineer. I never went to university, but I've been around, in and around engineering all my life. And I am somebody also who wakes up in the morning, more often than not, most mornings, and has what I think is a great idea. And sometimes those great ideas make me extraordinarily busy. Some of those ideas just fade away, and some of those ideas, become those challenges.
Well, there's a famous quote. I think was it Winston. I don't know if it was Winston Churchill, but in order to have a good idea, you've got to have lots of ideas, or something like that.
Yes. And I wish I'd written them all down, and I wish I could share them with you, because you'd probably go, "Oh my God, did you really think of that? It's a rubbish idea." But with what I've been doing at UNSW and running the Sunswift project, which, when I arrived, after I said yes to Mark Hoffman and he gave me those business cards with Professor on, and I joined the university and I started looking after the Sunswift project, which is a car project that's been around since 1996 and was created by a small group of academics and PhDs who I believe got drunk one night.
That's where lots of good ideas come from.
I do all my best work. Ironically, I've given up drinking, but I'm still having the ideas. So
you must have loaded up in previous years, in those past 40 years then.
Yeah, I always thought it was alcohol induced, but clearly it's not. And they had this great idea of building a car to compete in the World Solar Challenge. Fortunately, one of them, probably the designated driver, remembered the conversation the following morning, and so it was. They created Sunswift, which is a cunning name for UNSW. If you look at the word Sunswift, if you write it down, you'll realise the letters UNSW are within the name Sunswift, which is great. Wish I could take the accolade for thinking of that one, but it wasn't my idea. But I'll take it anyway. And that's what they did. They started designing and building cars to compete in the World Solar Challenge, solar electric cars, and did a great job and continued to do with some success within the World Solar Challenge, now known as the Bridgestone World Solar Challenge. I have to do that, otherwise I'll lose my partnership with Bridgestone.
Yes, and that's here in Australia, is it? I mean, it would make sense to be here. The place is quite flat and there's a lot of sun.
Convenient for us, being in Australia and competing, but it's a global event. It's gained greater notoriety and focus over the years, just purely because, of course, back in the 80s when the World Solar Challenge started, the notion of ever driving solar-powered cars or even electric cars was crazy. That's the stuff of the Jetsons, That will never happen whilst you're filling up your V8 Commodore with continuing amounts of petrol. But here we are on this journey to electrification in transport. So it is ever so popular now, 70 teams from around the world. Back in the late 80s, it used to be the likes of Honda and General Motors that designed and built these crazy cars that competed. Honda sort of, as Honda do, I've worked with Honda in the past, and they sort of reached the summit and decided to do something else. So they sort of pulled out, and then General Motors pulled out, and it largely went to universities to take on the mantle to build these cars, which we still do. And in 2023, Sunswift won the World Solar Challenge for its very first time. So great. That was good. There's a little bit of that sort of Red Bull go in, never having won. A few years later, we win the World Solar Challenge for the first time. And the latest car, Sunswift 7, which is a solar electric car. So it's got a battery, albeit a small battery in relative terms to other EVs, only 38 kilowatts. We get about a kilowatt of energy from the solar that's on the roof, bonnet and boot. Super aerodynamic, very low drag coefficient, and super efficient in regard to its rolling resistance. Only weighs 600 kilos. So actually the total weight of the car, because of its composite construction, is less than a Tesla Model S battery. Just to give you some context.
Wow. Okay.
As a result, the car has a range of around 1,500 kilos. And
the heaviest thing in the car is the person sitting in it.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. And that car, Sunswift 7, is the current Guinness World Record holder for the world's fastest electric vehicle to complete 1,000 kilometres on a single charge of the battery. And we did that at 85 kilometres an hour average speed in just under 12 hours. And the really key factor of that was the energy consumption. It was only 3.33 kilowatt per 100 kilometres, which if you compare that to a Tesla Model 3, I think a Tesla Model 3, please don't quote me, is around 17 or 18 kilowatt hours per 100.
Right,
so 3.3 is extraordinarily efficient.
Very efficient, yeah.
So going on to your probably everybody's forgotten your remark about the Tri-brid. It's a natural progression, I think, for us as a project at UNSW to start exploring more. UNSW, top-ranked engineering university in the country, and Sunswift is by far the top project within that university. So it does attract the best young talent. And I think for myself, I have a duty to allow those youngsters, those brilliant minds to explore. And the Bridgestone World Solar Challenge regulations were quite restrictive in the technologies we could use. So I thought to sort of shake the tree a little bit and be a little bit disruptive, which I have been known at being in the past, I thought, well, let's design a car that might not comply to those regulations, and maybe we'll get some movement with that.
Just see where you can go with it,
So wind the clock forward a little bit, the regulations have been changed, but my wake up one morning after hearing or reading something on Facebook probably around hydrogen technology and battery technology, which was going to be the future. And I see both of those technologies maybe being a little bit of a sort of VHS Betamax moment. For the people listening of a certain age, they will understand what video cassettes were going back, and VHS won the fight.
Although Betamax was supposedly the better product, wasn't
superior,
it? But anyway,
far superior quality. But I believe it was down to Sony and allegedly the porn industry, who were the ones who pushed VHS across the finishing line. Right. And maybe that's what we're kind of seeing today, right? We're seeing governments around the world strongly encouraging consumers to go out and buy electric vehicles. And currently the technology in order to do that is battery technology with lithium-ion batteries. But maybe at some point hydrogen will be a good alternative or indeed a replacement.
I definitely think there'll be a mixture in the end, but
I don't think we should be looking for one solution and go winding the clock back to the 70s and 80s. Maybe we should have allowed Betamax to have had its day as well. But for me, sort of sitting on the fence a little bit was, okay, well, why don't we design a car that combines both of those technologies?
Yes.
Rather than, what you said there, Barry, maybe there's an option to have both, but why have a battery car and why have a hydrogen car? Maybe there's a point to put the two technologies together, and the Tri-brid bit is amalgamating the solar as well, and see if we can create a car with the intelligence to understand what it's doing at any one time, its use case. It will probably be AI generated, because bloody hell, AI is touching everything nowadays. But a car that understands that if you're driving to the supermarket, which is only a couple of kilometres away, maybe it does it purely on solar. It's a sunny day, and why the hell not? But maybe if you're driving, to your parents who live in, Melbourne, you're going to use a combination of battery and hydrogen, and maybe if it's sunny, a little bit of solar.
Yeah.
But maybe if you want a spirited drive, and maybe if you want to go to Sydney Motorsport Park and cut some fast laps, maybe it uses all three of those technologies, and to use a bit of a spinal tap, everything's on 11.
Yeah.
So it's that car that maybe we're going out to sort of disprove or prove one or the other, or actually prove something new, that maybe there is a market to use both of those technologies.
I think perhaps a hybrid vehicles at the moment seem to be, electric vehicles have sort of tapered a wee bit, and I know they're still quite expensive for most people, but the hybrid vehicles seem to have sort of picked up a wee bit, and I think it's the option of having this or that, which I think gives people a wee bit of security. So certainly, having those three options there does give you a bit of a safety blanket.
The comment you made, Barry, is very much focused now towards the Australian market. I think if you take California as a good use case there, Americans up to a point probably still do very much so, driving their V8s and guzzling gas. California was quite smart. Every other driver at one point in California was driving a Prius, a hybrid. So they made a transition from parking their V8 Chevrolet in their picket fenced house in California to driving a hybrid, which was the best of both worlds. And that was that milestone transition to full electric. What we've tried to do here in Australia is go from a V8 Commodore to a Tesla Model 3 overnight, without that transitional period of hybrid, of understanding how we operate, how we drive, how we can charge cars, how we can still have that backup of hybrid. What we're doing now in Australia, we tried to flood the market with EVs and create that narrative around the environmental benefit. But because of the cost, because of the infrastructure, because of the geography of Australia, it's really challenging to put EV chargers everywhere because of how we live and the geography, relatively low population, great landmass. So now we're kind of backfilling. I'm good friends with the guys at Audi. I think in 2022, maybe 2021, maybe a little bit of COVID influenced. I think they sold something like 290 EVs. 290.
Right.
Crazy. Now you'll see Audi launching and releasing lots of hybrids in Australia to try and backfill maybe the strategy that should have been in place a long time ago. So I think we jumped on the bandwagon in Australia on EVs a little bit sort of at the same time as everybody else was, but everybody else had already done the
they were already a bit further forward. Yeah.
So we're sort of trying to retrospectively do that. So we kind of missed the trick over here. But hybrid technology is great. It's great. It's the best of both worlds until we get to the point where we can comfortably transition. And that transition is, there's nothing wrong with EV technology per se. Electric cars have a great range. They're very comfortable. They're still a little bit expensive, even though you'll see the cost of Teslas absolutely plummeting at the moment because those early adopters have purchased, and now they're trying to break through to everybody else who's sitting on the fence. So your Tesla Model Y that was $72,000, 18 months ago is now $52,000.
And I've seen there's a BYD car now that's just been released. I think it's about 28 grand. I think there's a new, which is actually getting there now with price wise. It's a BYD. It's not a Rolls Royce, but as long as if you want to get into, if you have a passion for it and you understand the benefits of driving an EV, and you can work with the charging challenges, then that's a great car for not a lot of money. If you are in the market to buy a car, and I say it like that because making anything on this planet has an environmental effect. Anything, whether it be a box of matches. I'm just looking around me, looking at a computer monitor. Whether it being a car, there is a negative effect on the planet. That's just a fact on everything. Everything needs energy to be manufactured. Yeah.
So I drive a 6-year-old BMW. It's a petrol car, and it's got just about to get to 110,000 kilometers. Being a BMW, it will probably be fine to run for 200,000 kilometers. Yes, it's burning petrol, but have a look at maybe the next. Let's say I'm going to get 5 years out of this car. Let's have a look at the environmental effect of me driving this car that's already been manufactured, it's already done its badness to the planet, running my car for 5 years on petrol has a demand on the environment, on the planet. If I was going to say, right, forget that car, I'm going to go and buy a brand new EV, a Tesla, what effect on the environment is that extra demand that I'm having now going to have on the planet? I think you'll find that running my BMW is probably better for the environment than just keep manufacturing all these brand new EVs. Let's let the consumers make their own mind up and let it happen naturally. I think, I haven't seen the facts and figures on it, so I'm speculating in some way, but Volvo did a study a number of years ago on exactly this, and they said that you would have to own your electric vehicle for 10 years for it to match the environmental effect on the petrol vehicle. So there's some data out there on that. I'm not telling people not to go out and buy EVs, but I think we need to understand the truth.
Well, I mean, but that touches onto a sort of, I mean, that's touches into the concept of waste anyway. Really, the fact that you need a new something every year, every couple of years. You don't really, use your. I mean, my car has just gone 300,000 kilometers now, and I'll probably still get another couple of. It's a Land Cruiser, not very environmentally friendly, but as you say, that cost is sunk, and I'm going to keep going for a while yet. Do you know what I mean? Rather than every 50.
You'll eke out every blooming kilometre you can. That's for
Well,
sure.
I shall, and I love that vehicle. I love it. But you know what I mean? Like, if you buy a brand new car every 3 years, like a lot of people do, really, I mean, it's not necessary. It's really not.
Well, we are living in a throwaway world, unfortunately. With technology moving at such a fast rate, we are living in a world of planned obsolescence. I mean, iPhones are the absolute epitome of that. In as far as Apple actually puts within its software the plan that it decides to make your battery deteriorate quicker to make you go and buy a new one. There's nothing wrong with this. Is an iPhone 14. It's fine. Why do I need to go and get another one with a camera with a couple of megapixels more? I mean, but that's how society is now driven. That we want to keep up with the Joneses. We don't want to drive the old Model 3 Tesla because it hasn't got a screen this big. We want to drive the new one, and we were prepared to take the hit on the cost. It's crazy world we're living in.
So what's the next step then with Sunswift? With this technology, you've developed this car that does something that no other car has done as yet. I mean, it's just a one-off though at the moment. So there's a few steps to take that into the cars that we all drive. But that's happened with Formula One in the past. Technology's developed. It eventually makes it into the cars that we all drive. What's the next step for you guys there at Sunswift to try and...
Well, that's a great question, Barry. That's a fantastic
okay.
question. That will lead me on to, I intentionally gave you and everyone the sort of background of Sunswift. At the beginning of 2020, I sort of rebranded Sunswift to be Sunswift Racing. I come from a racing background, and I understand how motorsport can develop technology. You touched on Formula One there, and how technology developed in Formula One at some point bleeds down into the mainstream, and it very much does. I mean, if you were to go out and buy a brand new Mercedes-Benz today, it would have... Every Mercedes, I believe, has a form of hybrid technology within it, mild hybrid or maybe a little bit more. But every Mercedes has a battery. It might only be a couple of kilowatts that works in conjunction to the main powertrain, and that is technology that has come down from its Formula One team. So it understands the importance of having that racing team to allow it to develop technology. So the plan at the moment is the brand new car, Sunswift 8, which is in design and manufacture, will be a one-off prototype. This is the Tri-brid technology. It will also be road legal. So being designed and built by a team of 100 undergraduate students, which is just incredible.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
in conjunction with some pretty incredible technology partners as well, that we try and partner wherever possible with organisations that are Australian, because I want to, even though I'm an Englishman, wave the Made in Australia flag to really showcase our capabilities here, and the fact that maybe the automotive industry is currently on hold. It hasn't completely disappeared, and maybe there's an opportunity to reignite it and move it forward and create manufacturing and a supply chain in Australia that can be sustainable going forward into the future. So Sunswift Racing is very much a UNSW initiative. It stands behind the pillars of sort of education, innovation and collaboration, but it's an educational project, and the output of that education is the fact that the team designs and builds pretty amazing, funky, agnostic energy vehicles, and Sunswift 8 is part of that. One thing I will be doing to move things forward, because I get bored and frustrated quite easy, and as I alluded to before, I keep coming up with these ideas. One thing we will be doing in the new year is launching Sunswift Technology. And Sunswift Technology will be an agency that focuses purely on technology. It aims to innovate and invent.
The technology that's come out of the development of these vehicles. Yes.
Yeah, well, not necessarily the technology that comes out, but the technology which will in future go in. So Sunswift Racing will build its cars, it will compete at the Bridgestone World Solar Challenge, it will continue to break world records. Technology will have a focus on developing that technology. It will have the option, once it develops new technology, to pass that technology over to Sunswift Racing for it to showcase. It also will have the opportunity, when it creates its own individual unique IP, to license that IP.
Right.
And pass that IP outside of its own four walls. So it will be a function that really tries to recognise what the problems are. What are the problems we're trying to focus on, and what the problems we're trying to solve in around mobility and transport. The car is yet but a vehicle, excuse the cliche, but it does give us the opportunity to house multiple different technologies. So, in energy storage, whether that be hydrogen, battery, solar technology, which is obviously clearly transferable outside of just the car, whether that be commercial, domestic, in other forms of transport, whatever that might be. So that will purely be an agency that allows us to put more focus on the future.
Yep.
And what those problems are, longer term technologies that might take a little bit more time to develop, and allow Sunswift Racing to focus on what it does in as far as building cars, still within an innovative focus, but allows it to build cars when it wants to build cars, and when appropriate, that technology crosses over. And then one thing we will also be doing, we're a little way off that, maybe 12 months, maybe 24 months, we'll be creating Sunswift Automotive.
Right.
And that will be the focus of productionization of that technology.
Yeah. Wow, that's exciting. There's lots of really exciting things just about to happen. Yeah.
So look, I'm the Formula One guy. So all I'm trying to do, Barry, is emulate the structure of many Formula One teams. Mercedes-Benz, which I touched on before. They have a Formula One team that develops and accelerates technology, and they have an R&D function, and they have a production function of selling cars. So I'm trying to sort of create a Formula One team, I suppose, but not go Formula One racing.
Yes.
But to have that racing side, which is the university project that has the profile and brand awareness and the credibility to be able to showcase that technology. Sunswift Technology, which is the sort of R&D agency and design house, but we won't keep it to ourselves. It's great building cars and winning Bridgestone World Solar Challenges and creating Guinness World Records, but why stop there? If you've got something that's amazing that can have an effect on the future, why not let others have access to that? and I think that's that's the focus going forward. There's such brilliant minds here in Australia, such brilliant young talent, that we should utilise it more. And then let's see how we go, and hopefully the creation of Sunswift Automotive will allow us to productionise some of that technology. So take it from the development stage and actually mature it into a product that can be purchased or fitted into multiple EVs. Who knows? Maybe Sunswift can be responsible for developing a widget that can be plugged into every electric vehicle on the planet that increases its range by 10% or reduces its energy consumption by 10%. Who knows? So we're out there to explore. We're hopefully a group of pioneers that are looking forward to seeing what we can do with the talent that we've got.
I think that's fantastic, and I think that's probably a good place just to leave it just there. With you've done all of this hard work, you've got this groundbreaking vehicle, and now it's looking at how to spread that into other vehicles around the world and start really making a difference. So Richard, thanks very much for your time. Is there anything else that we want to cover off just before we go, or
I think we covered off quite a bit there. I think that's pretty good.
All right, that's great. Thanks a lot, Richard. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, Gary.
Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to share these little solutions far and wide.